welcome to the Soccer Coaching Podcast, brought to you in association with our friends at Soccer Coach Weekly, reflecting our shared ambition to help coaches have the most effective, enjoyable and successful coaching journey for them and their players. We hope you enjoyed this episode and thanks for listening. Mark Edwards, welcome back to the Soccer Coaching Podcast. How are you?
Very well, thank you, Scott. How are you?
I'm good. First question, where the hell have you been?
It's been a long time. Yes, it has been a long time. I have been listening to I've listened to quite a few of the episodes actually.
You almost said some, and you've upped it to quite a few. So well done.
Well, I listened to the Nick one. I think that's the most recent one, or maybe it's the one before the most recent one. Yeah. That was absolutely superb. And I've listened to some of the other ones as well. I must say, I think the show misses me. The podcast misses me. However,
the audience does. The audience does.
Sure,
the ratings have gone through the floor since you left.
But I must say, you've taken it to a different level in terms of the guests you have on, and just the different kind of subjects you cover from a coaching standpoint. I honestly don't think there's any other podcast out there that from a grassroots standpoint or from like a youth coaching standpoint that competes with it. It's good, very, very good.
We have to try and find new topics after on episodes. We have to try and find things we haven't spoke about before, just to kind of keep it fresh. But yeah, well, we missed you definitely, and
Thank
it's
you.
quite timely, not just because of the topic we're going to cover, but also at the weekend I was at a football thing, as we often are, and there was a lovely parent there. So we'll shout out to Romy, who was talking about podcasts and was like, when he found out that I was the host of the Soccer Coaching Podcast, he was like, "No, you, Scott, it's Scott and Mark." So I feel like our celebrity status is finally making some traction. Finally,
it's there. You're famous on the podcast.
Both of us, we were both name checked by him, and he called his wife over and his lovely kid and lovely family, and we're like, "I listen to you all the time" and stuff. So that was very nice to get some face-to-face positive feedback. And very much, he's obviously working through a lot of the earlier episodes, which we were both doing.
Yes, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And did you get pictures?
He took a selfie. He had a selfie for us. So yeah, I need to start worrying about my hair a bit more. Not that I don't worry about enough already, but maybe even more so. Oh dear.
Brilliant.
Well, today's
Absolutely
topic,
brilliant.
I know that you're the perfect guest for this, 100%. And we've been asked actually a few times since we did the one on 5-a-side football way back, but for some reason a lot more recently as well about 7-a-side football and that transition from 5 to 7-a-side and what it looks like, kind of all things to do with that. So you are definitely the man for this. Sound all right to you?
Sounds good. Yeah, really good. Yeah, let's do it.
Well, look, if you don't mind, Marky, just I know most people will know you from the earlier episodes anyway, but just, and maybe there's an update to this anyway. Well, there is an update, I'm sure, on a few things you've been doing recently. I know that for sure. So a bit of background about you, your coaching journey, and, what it is you currently do in the world of coaching. Yeah,
of course. Yeah. So I guess like as many kind of grassroots coaches, I got into coaching as my son was playing football. I was the kind of last parent to sit down when they were looking for a coach to take on the team. As you know, we did it together, right? And back in the early days, and it was some interesting memories, I would say, from back then. Probably very different to what we would do now, but hey, it was a learning curve. So that was kind of 7 or 8 years ago. So coaching for 7 or 8 years now. I took my level 1 probably 6 years ago. Level 2 about 3 or 4 years ago now. Done my futsal qualification as well. So I've coached through 5-a-side, 7-a-side, just starting out with 9-a-side now. So at the moment coaching the under 10s, and we're just transitioning from 7 to 9, which has been a really interesting experience. So we've had 2 seasons at 7-a-side, and I must say it's probably my most favourite format for youth football. Brilliant format. But I've also tried to do other things in terms of done some coaching with some girls teams as well. Not just the odd session to help out at the club, and that was really, really interesting. I've also done some coaching with some under 17s last year, which again was something different. Although I'll be honest, a lot of the session I used was from the under 10 session. I just adapted it slightly, and it worked really well actually. But obviously it's very different dealing with the under 17s compared to the under 10s, that's for sure. And the other thing is I'm the youth development officer at the grassroots club I'm at, so Ickenham Youth. So I'm one of the youth or football development officers, which is an interesting challenge alongside of coaching and alongside a full-time job. So yeah, I think it's probably fair. I don't probably commit as much time as I would like to that part of the role. I do as much as I can. I help out as much as I can. But I think if I wasn't coaching, I'd be able to do a lot more on that side. But it's just a challenge to spread yourself around a bit, right?
Yeah, and it's a volunteer role, right? So you give up your time to do it. And we could do a whole podcast, I'm sure, on the football development role and stuff like that, and the challenges. And I'm sure the challenges you face, which are positive challenges, but I'm sure it's similar throughout the country and other grassroots clubs as well. But we've got to be disciplined on this podcast. We spoke before that we can't have a 3-hour one, so we've got to try and stick to the topic, which is going to be almost impossible, I know. Yeah. So
we never used to be, I must say.
I know. I'm trying to be more around that hour-ish kind of thing. But maybe that's something to talk about at some point when going back about covering that topic around what the role is, how it works, and how you guys approach it at Ickenham. But like I say, another podcast.
Yes.
What about your philosophy, Mark? Because again, obviously, I know you really well. I think I'd sum up myself. I know how you're coaching and stuff like that. But 2 questions: kind of what would you say roughly is your current philosophy, if you can sum it up, and has that changed at all in the 8 years you've been coaching?
Yeah, I definitely think it's changed a lot, and I think not just the philosophy, but how I go about coaching and how a typical session would look like. It's changed. It's changed. I think since we started this podcast, if I listen back to the
first 10 minutes ago, you mean?
No, I haven't changed that quick. No, but when we first started doing podcasting that long ago, it's certainly changed in that period. I actually documented my philosophy a couple of seasons ago, and I haven't kind of updated it or changed it since then, and I believe it's still kind of fit. So I had a philosophy, and I also had core values, my own core values, which I had documented. So from a philosophy standpoint, I think I had three points. One was around creating a positive environment, which is conducive for long-term player development, and putting the player at the center of the session. And I think you can probably interchange player with person or boy or girl, whoever's in there. And it was really a focused development over results. So that was the first one. Second one was a bit more about my coaching, and it was around developing versatile players who are technically strong and comfortable with the ball in all areas of the pitch, who are able to make good decisions both in and out of possession. And then the last one, which I think was probably the most important for me, was designing fun training sessions where players are not afraid to try new things and can make mistakes without any fear. And I think that was, for me, was the most important one, right? If the sessions are not fun, then essentially the boys or girls are not going to want to come back and play football. So that was my philosophy. From a core values were a little bit kind of more streamlined. So number one was be inclusive and treat all players equally. And to the point where if someone come in, they wouldn't know who my son was, if I'm coaching him. Be prepared and organized, and then finally work hard and always look to learn, which I think is really, really important when you're a coach.
And so they're your core values for you as the coach?
Exactly. They're my core values. Yeah.
Brilliant. Love it, Mark. Super. I think that's an important part, isn't it? It's about core values. And it's obviously related to kind of the player side of things and how we coach the team or the players, but we don't necessarily always reflect on ourselves and then like what's important to us and what's going to help us be able to do the job the best we can do it. Brilliant. I've got a question for you, not to challenge you straight away, because I love what you've put down here. And obviously no issues with the environment, no issues with fun and fearless, versatile players.
Yes.
What happens, and you might have seen this when you worked with the under 17s, what happens when you have players that aren't versatile or aren't used to being treated like they should be versatile? What I mean is there some players that you come across or could come across that actually have been told since they were under sixes they're a really good striker or a good centre back or a good goalkeeper, and that's kind of all they've known and all they've done maybe for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years? And in those situations, how do you then promote versatility? Can you still do it? Is it still doable? Is it just need a different approach? Maybe it's a bit unfair to ask you because I know you didn't work the 17s for long, but you did a few sessions with them. But was it a challenge or does it change depending on the age?
Yeah, I think and I think we get into some of this stuff when we talk about seven-a-side because the five-a-side part of it, and you know this well, is it's such an important period. Those 2 years at five-a-side, being rotating positions and learning to play as a forward player, as a back player, maybe even being in goal, playing on the right and playing on the left. It's so important to have that versatility, and not pigeonholing not pigeonholing players at such a young age where they're just a defender or they're just a forward player and they don't know how to play the other roles. I think it's important. It's really, really important. I think that as they get older, I think it gets harder and harder to be able to do that, because, and rightly or wrongly, because it becomes more result focused, right? As soon as you kind of get beyond under 12s, it becomes competitive. And again, we've had these conversations.
Sometimes beyond under fives.
Well, yeah, exactly, yeah, super competitive. But it officially becomes competitive football, and I think at that point, it's really hard for coaches to be able to play a player that can only play at the back in centre midfield as a forward player, rightly or wrongly. I think it just gets harder and harder.
And it's part of that their mindset, though, Mark. I mean, is it obviously there's going to be an ability element to that, right? They've not played it, so they're not necessarily got the technical attributes at that moment in time. But how much of it is just a mindset? Like, do players think of themselves just as a certain position? Then how do you change that? Is the challenge the mindset, or is it the actual ability, or is it a bit of both?
I think it's a bit of both. I think obviously there's certain attributes to being a back player compared to being a forward player.
Yeah.
Back player, the game's in front of you. You can see it in front of you. It's a different game, and I think that there are different attributes, different skills, and I think unless you take them on at younger age, look, you can do it, and you need coaches to be open-minded to be able to offer the players the chance to do it. But it just gets harder unless you get it right at a young age and give that opportunity.
And I guess if I'm looking at your point too about being versatile in isolation, then it's challenged me actually with your points 1 and 3 about the environment and being fun and fearless. Then actually, that's the way you win it, I guess, isn't it? Because actually, if you rock up to my session and you know that mistakes aren't going to be punished and you're going to be challenged out of your comfort zone, and that's okay. Well, then suddenly you can change that mindset and you can then spend some time working with players to develop the skills and techniques they need to be versatile.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other thing to remember is that as you go through the older age groups, maybe training gets a bit more tactical focused, and then a bit more position focused. So whereas at the under 10s or under 9s, under 8s, you play a lot of small sided games, and actually you don't really have positions, or if you do, then you rotate the positions all of the time. As they get older and it's more tactical, then you probably have a bit more structure in terms of where players are playing, where their strongest position is, where they're going to play on the Saturday or Sunday, right?
Yeah, so true. And I guess versatility as well, even at a later age and a stage in a player's development, like, under 16s again, for example, if you're going to play centre forward, you could play it in different ways, can't you? So having that versatility still, it doesn't mean suddenly you've got to be, can you play centre back and centre forward? Actually, no, can you play centre forward, but in a way that's versatile enough to fit into different formats, different formations, different ways of playing, it not just in different teams, but also in different moments, right? If you're going to play a higher press, like there are different ways in which you can play the game. So I guess versatility is quite broad in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally agree.
Okay, so this is going to be complicated for me. I've got to try and keep my mind focused here. So we're looking at 7-a-side, but I know we're going to be kind of dipping from. Currently, we're doing 9-a-side, and obviously we started with 5-a-side. So it's kind of getting that balance right. But I guess if we really want to look at 7-a-side and how it played out, it would make sense to look back first at 5-a-side and think, okay, what things were there that either did or didn't work that maybe were useful for the transition to 7-a-side before we look at 7-a-side in more detail. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah, totally agree.
So cast your mind back to many moons ago. There, so the 5-a-side format, not necessarily how things started off, but just general overview. Okay, what was 5-a-side like, and maybe some of those things that you think were important that kind of either did or didn't work for looking back at 7-a-side.
Okay, all right, let's do it. So I think that, and obviously, look, as I talk about these things, these things, right? You were kind of heavily involved or you were coaching the team, and I was kind of helping out at this point at the 5-a-side stage. Yeah. So I absolutely agree that if you get it right at 5-a-side, it makes the transition to 7-a-side a whole lot more straightforward and easier. So I think some of the things, I think firstly, core values for the players. And we've spoken about this previously in a podcast, and you've spoken about it since on other podcasts I've heard. So we had the respect, effort, fun. So we had that clearly set out. The boys knew exactly what that was. And then as we moved into 7-a-side, we didn't change that. We still got it as we got into 9-a-side. We just rolled that forward. So they knew that in terms of respect, they knew they had to respect each other. They'd respect the coaches, the referee, the equipment, the opposition coaches. They carried themselves in the right way. And we've seen that even recently in tournaments where they've been, as a team, as a kind of grassroots team, they've been successful. And the tournament down in Bournemouth, right, where they won the tournament in the final, before they were celebrating, they were off making sure the opposition were okay, who were upset, and then they had their celebration after. Which for me, it's the way they carried themselves. Which, like, obviously, I was great. They won the tournament, but the fact is that they behaved like that was just absolutely was spot on for me. And it was, and I think that's getting that drilled in that respect category at such a young age, it means they carry that through, and they carried it through into 7-a-side and 9-a-side and onwards. And I think the other thing is, it's not just in football. Hopefully, then now that carry that on in life as well, right?
Life skill stuff, isn't it?
Life skill, exactly, yeah. So you had respect, and you had effort, and you had fun. Obviously, the effort one speaks, given everything you've got, 100% effort. And then the last one is fun, and the most important one. And I think you always put focus on that. You've got to have fun. You've got to enjoy yourself. So that carried through. We also had kind of, I wouldn't call them principles of play, but the 3 outs. So we had outwork, outthink, and outplay. So they were, again, what you kind of put in place at 5-a-side, and we carried those on through in 7-a-side. And at one point in 7-a-side, we're even thinking about, we thought about it so long, and obviously recently we've had conversations about, do we replace the outs? But I think the messaging is so good and so effective that we just couldn't replace them. We couldn't improve on them. So why change if they're that effective? Why change?
They are so good. The challenge, I think, has been, isn't it, because they're so simply good. It's almost, how do you make it not more complicated, but how do you make it work in the bigger format of the game with the kind of more things going on? But anything else looks like it might be better, but doesn't work as well, does it? We haven't quite cracked that nut yet, in the sense of getting away from that. And like I said, if it's not broke, why fix it? But it almost seems too simple, doesn't it? And the messaging behind it, but it does work really well.
Yeah, and I think the messaging is just simple. It's something that you talk about in training. You talk about it before matches, then the necessity to outwork the opposition. Once you've outworked them, you can start outthinking, then you can outplay them. I think that's just the messaging is so simple, and the boys just got it, and it's just stayed. And I think it's very effective. So I think they were 2 things around, I think, core values, and maybe their outwork, outthink, outplay behaviors, or maybe principles that we had at that time. And then beyond that, one of the most critical ones, I think, is player rotation. So talking about the kind of versatility point, having boys rotate around, or girls, whoever you've got, a defender, as a back player, as a forward player. Even I think for 2 years we had different goalkeepers. We didn't have a fixed goalie at 5-a-side, which I think was some great lessons for the boys. And again, it's something that you put in place, and that's just helped the move to 7-a-side. It's made it so much easier, because you've got very well-rounded players that can play lots of different positions, and you can just carry that on into 7-a-side. You do some of the boys, as they get through to 7-a-side, I think we've seen maybe are stronger in certain positions and prefer to play certain positions, but they can still play. So if there's one of the boys that's maybe more forward thinking, he can still play it at the back. And then you've got probably 3 or 4 of the team who actually can play all of the positions equally as good, and then they don't stand out in any position. So it just made the transition a lot easier to 7-a-side. And I think that if something the coaches take away, at 5-a-side, just rotate all the time, back, forward, right, left, goalkeeper. And if it means that perhaps you don't win games, then it doesn't matter. Just keep rotating. I think it's just such a critical point.
Do you think, Mark, coaches misunderstand rotation and they don't use it enough? Because do they think they're being asked to rotate just because it's in inverted commas the right thing to do for a player? There's not actually any benefit for it. It's just like, you got to do that, the same way that you shouldn't really care about results. It's just, just go out and play your football. Do you think that's why they don't do it? Because the benefits, we've seen the benefits so much, haven't we, from helping the players understand that they're not in one position, even though they might have super strengths in certain areas that suits them certain position. But in a game, they're always going to be doing at least one other thing during the match. I don't understand why other coaches don't buy into it so much, and they really struggle to do it. There is a trade-off, obviously, in the sense of not having your strongest players, strong positions all the time, but you can manage that. You can pick your moments when to do these things and stuff.
Yeah,
I think it's more the coaches don't necessarily understand the benefits for the team and for themselves in many ways. Do you think that's a fair comment, or do you think it's more the fact they just don't want to lose games and they understand it can long-term benefits, but in the short term they're not interested?
I think there's three things actually. I think one is they don't understand the benefits, definitely. And you know what? I'm not sure that the FA do a fantastic job around selling the benefits of player rotation at such a young age.
Agree.
Because it's certainly something that I didn't pick up from the FA. I think it's something we kind of learned as we went through, and I think through discussions with yourself and some other coaches, like-minded coaches, you learn these things. So I don't think the benefits are there, well documented. I do think it's around winning, because it potentially might make you weaker as a team by rotating. It doesn't have to, if you manage it right and if you get your training right and things like that. But I think there is that win focus. But I also think the other thing is, and the last thing is really around, I think it's harder to manage as well. I think there's a lot more thought has to go into how you manage the team and how you rotate positions. And I know that it probably spend an hour a week, even 7-a-side, working out, okay, we've got a game Sunday, we've got 9 players. I want everyone to play at least 2 positions. So for the first quarter, I'm going to do this, this, and this. Second quarter, this, and this. So it just makes it harder. And you're also having to think about, I want us to be competitive. I don't care if we win or lose, but I want us at least to be competitive in the game. So I can't do this and I probably can't do that. Or I don't want to do that. Maybe I can do it, I just don't want to. I think it's just harder to do. And I think there's also a little bit maybe of pressure from parents as well. Where unless you manage the parents, and the parents discussion we've done before, and it's a hard one, but I think there's also pressure from parents as well.
So core values, life skills, the outwork, outthink, outplay, rotation, these are all things that we put in place at 5-a-side, and that served well for 7-a-side.
Yeah.
Anything else from 5-a-side that kind of carried across well?
I think 2 other things I would say, and then probably you, I'll ask you actually, because you've probably got some as well. But one is equal game time. I think that was critical, right? And we still do that now, and we still do that at 9-a-side, and we still do that in tournaments. Even if it's a final, we still do equal game time. We might position to start maybe with our stronger players or so-called stronger players, and it doesn't always work like that actually. And then we rotate them, but everyone gets equal game time. I think that's such an important part, right? It doesn't matter if you're I don't know, whoever you are, if you're the striker in the team or the forward in the team, you shouldn't get more game time than any other players just because you maybe score 100 goals in the season. So that was really, really critical. And I also think the formation at 5-a-side was important as well. So again, I think there was a couple of formations that we tried at both with the older age group we had at 5-a-side, and then with the younger age group. So we had the kind of diamond, I guess, 1-2-1 formation, and then we had the 2-2 formation. And again, this was your idea, and I think the 2-2 formation helped us as we went into 7-a-side, because the formation we had was 2 back players, and then we added a centre midfielder in to 7-a-side to create a 2-3-1, or it was actually a 2-1-2-1 formation. So I think that formation helped us, the 2-2, or we should say 1-2-2. We should include the goalkeeper. 1-2-2.
It's a good point on the formation, because that was probably in some ways the biggest gamble when we were doing the five-a-side, because it isn't it's not the easiest formation, because you kind of got straight lines. There's no diamonds there naturally. You can be too defensive, you can be too attacking, depending on who you're playing against. It requires the players to really play in the moment and understand what's going on, to support and to cover, kind of thing. And I don't know if we were lucky with just smart players, because they picked it up pretty well. I've seen videos from the first days where we've literally got two players standing back and two players forward, and it's in the very first few games. But I look at the team play now, Mark, and especially the work you've done at seven-a-side with them, and they've been fantastic. But one of the things that can go unnoticed is the movement the boys have at covering each other's spaces and stuff like that. And I think that comes down to the 2-2 formation. And over those 2 seasons when we were playing, you'd watch the players, and one would go up and one would cover. They'd always keep a bit of balance. And if 2 back players did go up, so occasionally an attacker would drop back in, or the front player would drop back in for them. And I think now when you watch them play, they do a lot of that. And it's almost like having extra players on the pitch. Even against strong teams that are maybe better pound for pound player wise, they seem to be able to manage them because of their movement, or at least part of the reason because of their movement. Have you seen that in the games? And do you think does that correlate back to the 2-2, or is there other reasons? I'm sure there's other things you've done as well, but is that a part of it?
I think, yeah, definitely. I think the 2-2, because with the 2-2, the back players, you permit one of the back players to go forward, and not permit one of the back players goes forward to support the play.
Encourage it, yeah, the right
and you encourage it, exactly. Encourage it. So there's an element of decision making when they go forward, when they don't go forward, and then one of the forward players, when we're out of position, I guess, tracks back to help out the defenders. So again, it's the decision making on what side is it on, who should be pressing, who should be dropping, covering. So that definitely helped. But I do think it probably also stems back to the training, in terms of a small-sided game approach in training, and having all those different kind of constraints or different rules when you're playing small-sided games. So I even remember one of the games you played at the very beginning of I think maybe under 6, under 7s. I think it was under 6s actually, where we were encouraging. I think you had a rule where one of the boys had to stay in their own half. So you were trying to encouraging them to, not all 4 of them to go running forward, just so they understood the concept of actually someone needs to kind of cover whilst other players going forward. But balance, that was the word, balance. Yeah. So yeah, I do think it's the training as well. But it wasn't specific for five-a-side, but the training, small-sided games training definitely helped.
Okay, yeah. Fantastic. So small-sided games, formation, I guess, we don't want to say you must be playing, if you haven't played 2-2 or 1-2-2 at five-a-side, you're going to be struggling. But I guess if your formation at five-a-side encouraged the players to think for themselves, right, and be versatile in what they did in their roles, that certainly helps in it seven-a-side. Because also for modern football, if you look at how modern football's played at the highest level, players don't do one job anymore, do they? Those days have gone. No. You've got centre-backs bombing forward and creating things. You certainly got, wing backs that are playing more attacking than they are defending, and the game has changed. Even goalkeepers do a lot more with their feet now than they've ever done before. So I think just good principles that play at five-a-side, whatever your formation, and good messaging around being brave and being flexible in your positions is a good thing, right?
Definitely. Well, if you look at City, right, you look at the way Man City play, you look at Edison, how much football he plays and the way they play out through him. You look at how high the wing backs get, whoever it's left or right, they both get very, very high. The 2 centre halves are comfortable on the ball, and they can play football and step out into midfield when they need to. You've even got some of the midfielders, I think Fernandinho can drop into the back 4 and play there. They played without a striker, and some of the attacking midfielders played as striker. And that's the modern game, right? That's it in a nutshell.
Perfect. All right. Well, then it seems like a good opportunity now to move our mind from five-a-side to seven-a-side. So my next question to you is, what were some of the things that you pondered and had to put in place, I guess, on that transition season? So it would have been this point maybe of the year where you're finishing your five-a-side games off, you're thinking about seven-a-side. What are some of the questions you had to kind of go through to feel like, actually, I'm going to be a good place come the start of the new season?
So it's a really good question. And one of the things that we really had to think through, and to be honest with you, I still struggle with it right now, is this whole me and my ball and me and sharing with the ball. Because obviously you're still at under nines. You've got 8-year-old boys, 9-year-old boys and girls. They're still the babies, right? In terms of the whole scheme of things.
Yeah.
And what I didn't want to do was completely change the fact that we wanted them to share the ball more, but I also wanted to start to bring that in, because I knew at under 10s it becomes a little bit, we wanted to focus on it more. And then when you get to 9-a-side, obviously then it really comes into play because the pitch becomes much bigger. So we had put a lot of thought, and as I said, I really struggled with this piece, especially in training, where perhaps some of the boys, maybe some of the more technically gifted boys or technical boys, would kind of run with the ball quite a lot. Should we encourage them to actually share it, or actually just tell them to keep being brave on the ball and keep playing? So that was a real challenge. And one of the things that we implemented, kind of messaging, and it's something we shared with all the parents actually, was around, I think, three kind of concepts. One is, in possession, can I play away from danger, either dribbling or passing? So we're not telling them to necessarily pass it all the time, but making sure that we're playing away from the danger, because there's more players on the pitch. So the chances are you're going to be encountering 2v1s, 3v1s. So make sure we kind of try and play away from danger. Second way, if my teammate's in possession, can I find space and call for the ball? And also we added to that and said it's what we say and how we say it as well. So when we're calling for it, making sure we're calling for it in loudly, and in the right way, kind of thing. And then finally is out possession. Can we close the space to win, or can we cover for a teammate? So that was the kind of real focus we had at the start of 7-a-side, around a lot of it around space and around movement. A lot of the focus was on that at 7-a-side, but it was a challenge, and I still don't know the right answer really to this, around me and my ball and sharing the ball. It's a tough one, right?
And the point you touched on, I guess, is actually different players have different preferences too, don't they? Some players do want to stay on it a lot, and other players actually almost want to overpass, don't they? And
yeah,
you got to maybe sometimes encourage others to think about when the right time maybe to share is going to be, and actually use others to stay on the ball and be a bit braver. But what you did nicely, I think, is give choices, right? It wasn't about being instructive around it, and it was consistent choices. So those choices don't change depending on who you are or who you're playing against. The choices stay the same. If you're struggling to beat the players in front of you, then maybe think about sharing the ball, and then we've got to make sure we've got an option there. And if you're confident enough to take one and have success, well, then that's okay too. But also kind of make those choices for yourself, and recognizing actually on some days the opponent might be a bit better, so you might have to share the ball a bit more, and other days you might not be quite on your top A game and you might have to share the ball more, or vice versa. So I think that that's fair enough, and I hadn't thought as one of the things you would have mentioned, to be honest with you, but I do understand how that quality was slightly different from 5-a-side, because if 5-a-side it is a bit more just run at them and see what happens a bit, isn't there? There's not as much passing.
Yeah, but there's still a lot of it. There's still a lot of dribbling, being on the ball at 7-a-side. There is a lot of it, but it's just trying to get the message in that that's not the only option. And to be fair, I think even at 5-a-side, as much as you encourage them, you've done a lot of 1v1 coaching with the boys from under 6s, under 7s, under 8s, and they really benefited from that. And still at 5-a-side, they still would make those passes. We remember encouraging them, if you're in the back players and you've got 2 attackers on, or 2 opposition against you, maybe the best time is to make a pass. So we started those little things at a younger age, but I think we've done a bit more of that as we went to 7-a-side.
And I would imagine there's some teams out there where maybe the ability levels are more varied. I don't mean actually good or bad, but actually skill sets. So some players maybe are really good on the ball, and other players maybe aren't so good, but are good at maybe being hard to beat, or better passes. I think we had quite a balanced skill set in the sense most of the players were about the same. One maybe was a little bit ahead of the pack because of where they've moved on to, but the rest were kind of similar in ability-ish, and stuff. So I guess by having a choices approach, you can still cater for your stronger player and what they do really, really well, and encourage to do that if they're really good at effectively beating players and being brave on the ball, but also recognizing the fact they've got choices to make, and actually when they are struggling, use their teammates. And you're not then kind of just having one rule for one player and one rule for a different player, are you? Because that's, we've seen that problem where the technically strong player gets praised and rewarded for doing all the great stuff, and then the kid at the back that maybe not technically strong, he has one go trying to be a player and it goes wrong, and then the coach is on their case straight away, and they're kind of done. So I guess that trying to put myself out of the team that we had, because it was, again, I guess from the five side, it was a bit different to what you might get in a grassroots team that hasn't had some of those principles in play.
Yeah.
What
I think that also comes back to the philosophy, right? If as a coach, you get your philosophy right in terms of the positive environment. There's the boys and girls are not afraid to make mistakes. Then that kind of hopefully helps in that situation.
And I meant to say that when you're talking about the philosophy and the values and the importance of actually really sticking to them and being consistent, isn't it? I think one thing we really pinned our badge on it and said, you know what, this is non-negotiable, and we bashed it on. We kept on about it till the boys were kind of sick of hearing it, I guess. And I think one of the testaments to that is the whole playing approach. I think when you ask the boys, probably at the start of 7-a-side, and I bet even if you ask them now, most of them to some extent or another, if you ask them kind of where they played as a position, they couldn't tell you. They might have some more preference now to kind of a slightly more attacking or defending role, or left side or right side, but I don't think any of the players in the team could tell you I'm the centre forward, or I'm the left back, or I'm the centre mid. I just, probably besides our goalkeeper that has been in goal for a couple of seasons now. The others,
I agree. And I think even at 9-a-side, as they've gone to 9-a-side, you've seen it, right? The boys, there's some of the boys can play any of the positions and equally as strong in those positions. So
all can play at least two, can't they? All of them can play at least two, which is great to see. But my question was going to be to you then, what about squad numbers? Let's get back to some of the basics of squad numbers. How many did you have at 5-a-side, and then how did you have at 7-a-side, and how did you make that work? Were you going for an arbitrary number, or was it actually looking at the players that were available, and how did you fill those spots if you did fill those spots?
So we had 7 at 5-a-side, and then when we moved to 7-a-side, we moved to 8 players, and we had one of the boys from the I guess the white team or the B team moved up to the red team or the A team. So obviously, as you know, in Ickenham we've got player streaming, so it encourages boys or girls to play at the right level for them, basically. So again, it's not easy to manage from either a coach or a parent standpoint, but boys and girls will move through teams as they progress, or if they need to be challenged more, or if they maybe need to be maybe play at a slightly maybe lower level for them to develop and then kick on thereafter. So I think I'm just trying to remember now, actually. We went to 8 for 7-a-side, and then we brought in a boy from outside, joined from another club, joined to give us 9 effectively. So we had seven starters, 2 subs.
It's quite annoying. Just quickly, again, I won't get sidetracked by this, but just I'm going to shut this out because I think it's really important to recognise this. And I don't think we do it perfectly as a club, but I think this age group did it really, really well. When you talk about streaming, and I know there's an argument for saying, I have all mixed ability teams, and I was on that page, but I'm not anymore. I think streaming done properly is the most effective way, in my opinion, of doing it. Effective. But streaming, it should really be where, as much possible, where you stream up and not down. And I think, if I could correct me if I'm wrong here, Mark, but I think from probably, I imagine there's 40 or 50 kids in this year group now that we've got. They're currently under 10s going to under 11s. I don't think there's one player that's streamed down across the 3 groups. I could be wrong, but I'm not aware of one. And I think there's probably at least half a dozen that have streamed up from blue to white and white to red, I think, which, it shows you it can be done. And dare I say it again in quotation marks, with 6 teams have been successful. So teams that are doing well and achieving and doing okay, it hasn't been detrimental. It's not been streaming for streaming's sake, but actually where you kind of work collaborative, you share ideas and you kind of work to giving players in. Streaming done that way, I think it can be done really nicely and effectively, where all the players get a good experience, not just a case of actually which players can we move down now just to accommodate external players that are going to be stronger for our A teams. I won't go off on one too much, but it was just because it's been done really, really well. And that's not, I know it's not easy, especially when you're the A-team coach, if you like, because it's got to be led by I think that person to support the other two teams, or three
Yep.
if you've got, or four if you've got more than that. But credit to you and all the coaches that have made that work over the years. I know it gets harder now. I do understand that as well, especially as the players get a bit more set and teams get a bit more set. But for those foundation phase, let's say that first 3 to 5 years, 5 and 7 aside, it was done super well in this age group. So well done to you and the other coaches.
No, I agree. And again, you're the one that kind of set it up as well. So I think it has worked really well. I think what we probably will find is, as now you go into the kind of youth development phase, maybe the gap gets a bit bigger because the I don't know, I don't want to call them the A team or the red team, probably are playing more football. So it's the number of hours they're playing, and maybe some of the other boys from other teams are doing other sports or something different. They're focused on other things. So I do think the gap gets bigger, but hopefully we'll still be able to do stream and that way. And actually, one of the really interesting dynamics, just off subject slightly, some of the older age groups in the club, which we've seen, actually boys move from the red team or the A team to the blue team, the C team, because they wanted to play with their mates. So they're not bothered about the standard they're playing at, and they just want to play with their mates, which is, I guess, is an interesting dynamic. We haven't seen that before.
And their passions change, don't they, at certain levels?
And
which
it changes.
Is fine, exactly. And that's the important thing, is you've got a space to do what's right for you and exactly. Your kind of your passion quota, if you like, how much you're into it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got a squad. So you 7 aside, you had 9 players. So you were going to games with 2 subs.
Yes, yeah. And then eventually we went to 10 towards the second half of under 10s, because I knew the transition to 9-a-side was coming. So we took another boy from our white team, joined us for the second half of that season, just to get him embedded in the team with the boys, and getting ready for 9-a-side. So it became a bit more challenging with 3 subs, I must say. 2 subs, I think, is ideal. 3 subs is a bit more challenging, especially when you're trying to do the right things around equal game time, still doing player rotation, still making sure that they're doing the forward and back positions. It does become challenging with 3 subs. It's doable, but it's more challenging.
And then let's think about this now. So you've got your players now for your squad. It's that kind of transition season. What did you do over that? If you can remember back, well, what were you doing kind of over that summertime, just to, or maybe even start a pre-season for 7-a-side to get the players ready? Were things changed much, or was it just games and practice?
I would say it didn't change a lot, and I can kind of, again, I prepared a document and sent it to the parents, say this is the structure of how training is going to look, and these are the coaches' non-negotiables for this season around training. What we're going to do in training. So in terms of the structure of training, I'll quickly go through structure of training, and I'll tell you a couple of things that I think we changed from 5-a-side. So we maintained things up, free play. So upon arrival, there was just free play. We just let them play, and that again was player led. We tried to do some kind of agility games or fun warm-up game with the boys, either be Fox's Tales or some agility type games or some reaction games. So we would do kind of 5 or 10 minutes of that. Then we would go into small-sided games. So it would be 1v1s, 2v2s, 3v3s, up to kind of 5v5, 4v4, 5v5, because we didn't have a bigger squad than that. Lots of things like Fanino, we kept that stuff going with 2 goals. Again, that's stuff that you put in at the 5-a-side level. We tried to use different size goals, different size pitches, things like that. All just a lot of versatility. Sometimes no goalies. We had line receiver to encourage a bit more passing and things like that. So then we would do some ball striking as well to kind of finish the session. So that would be the general structure. I would say that the difference between 5-a-side and 7-a-side was, I think, 2 things. One is we probably did less 1v1 work and more 2v2, 3v3 games. And I personally, I think the team massively benefited from 1v1 at such a young age, 6s, 7s, 8s. We still did it in 9s and 10s, 7-a-side, but we did a bit more 2v2. And I think the 2v2 game, you've got a lot of 1v1 situations still, but you've also got the option to share the ball with a teammate. So it just made the boys think a little bit more about sharing the ball. So we did a lot of that work, and we did a lot of games where if we had 10 boys there, we'd have two 2v2 pitches set up. So you'd have 8 playing, and then 2 would be off. And then as soon as someone scored, then the 2 that conceded would come off, the 2 that would go on. So and then the two that had scored would get the ball and shoot the other way. So it's a lot around reaction, transition, quick transitions, and also sharing the ball. So we did a lot of work around that. And then just coming back to what I said earlier around the use of space and movement. So things like can I play away from danger, dribble or pass, finding space and calling for the ball when my teammates got it, and then pressing and covering, that kind of stuff when we're out of possession. So I would say they were the 2 real areas that we changed, that maybe were a little bit different for either side. But then we also did some other things in terms of like a training spectrum. And I'll be honest, this isn't a real strength of mine. I know you do this very well in terms of like a weekly focus, but we did a lot of things around switching the play, which has really benefited as we've gone to 9-a-side actually. So simple games like you might have channels in, wide channels where the boys have got to play into one channel before they score. Then you progress it to playing 2 channels. You might have 2 wide gates in on the pitch where they've got to play through the gate before they can score. And if it goes through, you've got to come back. So it encourages a little bit of switching the play and using the width of the pitch. We've done some things also around possession, like again, a game that you would have used as well, passing for points. So the more passes, the more goals you get. We did some stuff around penetrative passing, which the boys used to get very excited about when we played those games. So through balls, obviously, because 7-a-side, there's no offside. So the forward player can almost hide behind the defender and be effective to find with through balls. And then we also done some work in terms of playing through the third. So we split the pitch up into 3 zones, and then they would have to pass through each zone, and then we would progress it. You could pass from zone the defending zone to the attacking zone. So we would work that, and it again, I think that stuff has helped when they get to 9-a-side as well. I'll be honest, that playing through the thirds was not the boys' favorite game. They wanted to get on the ball and dribble with it. At least we had a dribble. Exactly, yeah. They didn't want to be passing from one zone to the other. But look, I think we did it. We didn't do it for a long period of time, but it was effective in terms of and making sure that, or encouraging the boys to find space to receive it, create an angle to receive, first touch, and things like that. So we did a lot of stuff around that, and most of the work we did was in possession, attacking. We did very little work in terms of defending actually, and rightly or wrongly, again, maybe it comes back to some of my principles that I just wanted the boys to be good on the ball, technically good on the ball, understand that use of space and movement. I think it's so critical that we did a lot of that stuff.
It's funny you say that now, because I never really put this together until you mentioned it, but the boys are so good at using space. I'd written down space a couple of times as you were speaking, because all those games really were really about finding space, aren't they? You know, even the 2v2 games, it's like, how do I even make my space, or do I find the space? And the team are so good at that, particularly switching play, you know, and doing things and playing through the thirds, but particularly switching play. But I would say if there was kind of a little Achilles heel to the team, it maybe is their defending. It is their little bit of work off the point. Not them, they're still good at it, but as a collective, I would say that they're a good possession-based team. But what under-10s team is really most of them want to be on the ball more than the ball, so fair enough. But I guess when you look at anything, actually, you know, would there have been a benefit of doing a bit more time on defending? And my question then would be, if you could go back now, would you do more time defending? With the caveat being that actually, if we could be even better off the ball, then it makes it harder when we're on the ball, and we've got therefore get better being on the ball as well. Do you know what I mean? So it might drive up that side of the game. Or do you think you kind of got the balance right? And it's okay sacrificing defending stuff because actually you just want to be good on the ball? Because you still got to defend, right? There's still defending going on in training sessions. Players have seasons. They still have to work hard to win the ball back. So it's not happening. It just doesn't have the light shone as much. So there's a lot still going on around defending. It just isn't necessarily a focal point. Would you shine a brighter light on it if you were going to do it again, or were you happy with the balance that you got?
Maybe I would put a bit more work, maybe perhaps on 1v1 defending. So using your body and not making it difficult for the opponent. Perhaps a bit more on that. But in general, I I don't think I would change much, because I want, as I said, I wanted the boys to be technically good on the ball, understand movement and space, and I think we were able to do that to a certain degree, and I wouldn't want to compromise that, especially. I think, as I said, we've seen the benefits, and you've seen the benefits as well as we've gone into 9-a-side them when they're on the ball. Definitely, there's work to be done defensively for sure. But yeah.
What about more broadly then, just training intensity? And I always think the boys were trained with high intensity for all the sessions, but was that a focal point? Did you have to think more, okay, now we're going 7-a-side, we've got to train harder or faster? Or was it actually, again, did you have it right at 5-a-side? Didn't need to change anything? Or did you think actually we've got to do things a bit different around just that environment? Did you crank it up because they got a bit older and the format was bigger?
I think we were lucky, because again, I think what you'd put in at 5-a-side in terms of the intensity levels, the core values, we always went back to those core values around respect, effort, and fun. I think that was well ingrained in terms of the training session. So I didn't feel there was a need to really up the intensity levels. It always felt they were quite good. There were obviously times when they dropped and it felt a bit flat. And we always remember having conversations after training. And funnily enough, we used to compare Wednesday night to Saturday morning, and always felt Saturday morning intensity levels are much higher than a Wednesday night, where in the end we stopped doing a lot of kind of maybe sessions like switching the play or playing through the thirds on a Wednesday night. We try to just get it a lot more just fun, games based. We always wanted to be fun and games based, but we just kind of stripped it right back on a Wednesday, because I think we felt that after school and things like that, it just took its toll a little bit, and the boys didn't absorb things as well as they did on a Saturday morning. So yeah. But I think from intensity level, no. And we had the boys for an hour and a half, so it's just quite a long time, right? So we in terms of the structure, we tried to break it up a little bit, and it wasn't just always playing small-sided games. So we kind of mix things up a little bit at times. But
it's a good point, because so your training week would have been an hour on a Wednesday, an hour and a half Saturday, games on a Sunday, right? That's kind of how the boys did, and they were pretty good. Yeah. Attendance always quite good.
Yes.
And even though the principles were the same and the core values were consistent throughout either training session or the matches, on Wednesday you'd make it a bit more kind of less coaching, a bit more, even more games based than you might have done on a Saturday, where some of Saturday stuff was more about actually some tactical and some kind of principles would be in there a bit more overtly than maybe on a Wednesday.
Yeah, definitely. I think we'd still, on a Wednesday, we'd still ensure that there was the intensity level, that we're working hard, but maybe we're just a bit less kind of maybe less structure in terms of the actual game, or the games that we played were a lot more fun and things like that. So
okay, so this may be two questions in one, or maybe one I don't know. 7-a-side, formation and principles. What changed? Obviously, the formation must have changed because you're going 7-a-side. So you mentioned about maybe dropping the two positions in there, but what did you have? More than one formation? Did it change in that position? Did you just, how was that? And then how did that, if at all, impact on your principles at 7-a-side compared to what you're doing at 5-a-side?
Yes. So so I'll take the I guess the questions. I take the formation first of all. Perfect. So formation was 1-2-1-2-1. Which I guess you could say it's 1-2-3-1. So you'd have your goalkeeper, you'd have a left defender, right defender, a kind of centre midfielder that would actually be, I would probably old school box to box centre midfielder. We'd want them to cover when one of the defenders goes forward, and if go forward when they don't need to. You'd have a left midfielder, right midfielder, and a forward player. So we felt that formation adapted well from 5-a-side to 7-a-side. And also it allowed, one of the big things we kind of worked on from a principle to play perspective was width and depth. So you make the pitch big, basically. And again, I think it comes back to some of the things I remember you talking about at 5-a-side around making the pitch big when we're attacking, make it small when we're defending. We just built on that, basically. And the midfielder left and the midfielder right, we encourage them to be kind of like wing backs, but really wide, really hug the touchline, right? And we were quite kind of blessed with the boys that played it. Those two wide positions were technically very good. So they got into 1v1 situations a lot, and were able to dominate from a 1v1 standpoint, and were able to kind of cut in. So they don't really hit the byline like a traditional 11 side and get crosses in, because you got 8 or 9 boys, but 8 or 9-year-old boys, but they would get in 1v1 situations and then drive into the box. And at that point, you could either shoot or you could make your pass. So that was something we really, really worked on in terms of keeping the width. And again, I think we've seen the benefit as we've gone to 9-a-side on that side of things. And also from a depth standpoint, our forward player, we wanted him to be high. So really, and depending on the opposition and the way they played, but sometimes even hiding behind their back players because there's no offside, he could hide there and look to receive balls either from a centre midfield or from a wide player or from a defender, but also to mix it up, to come and receive it as well off a defender if it's on. The other positions, the other 3 positions that we've got, centre midfielder, I'm going kind of working my way back now. The centre midfielder was probably the most important position. And from a decision-making standpoint, there were so many decisions for that player to make in terms of when they go forward, when they drop back and need to help out the defenders or screen the defenders, when they dribble with the ball, when they pass the ball. It was just it's such an important position in that formation. And we rotated the boys. There were a lot of different boys play there, and again, we were fortunate that from 5-a-side that boys were able to step up and do that. Even though centre midfield was a completely new position from 5-a-side, it's just a really, really, really important position. And
that links back, Mark, doesn't it? So I think that bit about in your 2-2 formation at 5-a-side, the players have more than one job to do, right? A little bit. So the fact they weren't pigeonholed as I'm just a back player or front player, they actually do both in the moment, then that would have probably helped them with that kind of thinking about being that midfield player where I've got to do 2 roles in one position.
Yes, totally agree. Yeah, absolutely. And it's that formation, and it's what you do in training as well around providing lots of problem solving opportunities and decision making. And in training, if you're doing that in training, you can just drop in snippets of information, or you could have gone there, or you could have done this. What else could you have done? You're not telling them. You're just asking the question, and then 9 times out of 10 they come back and said, "Oh, I could have made that pass, or I could have dropped back," or they know, but. It's so that was an important position. And then the back players, the 2 back players, we had a defender left, a defender right, and they were quite narrow. They weren't wing backs. They were kind of, obviously they sometimes were left backs, or sometimes they were left centre backs, depending on where the ball was on the pitch. And we used to do a lot of work around shape. And I think you've heard me call shape a lot on the during matches.
I think about 1,000 a match. I reckon you shout the word
exactly.
Shape. It works. Yeah. It works.
It works, yeah. But yes, it does work. And we'll talk about shape. We'll come back to that, because I've
heard you shout worse things on the pitch.
Not intentionally. But even with those defenders, we encourage them to go forward, like at 5-a-side, right? You probably, both of you can't go forward, but like if you've got the ball at the left and left defender, drive forward, and if you've got a one-on-one, have a go at do that one-on-one. Like, it doesn't matter, just do it, just have a go, right? And we really, really encourage that domination continue the domination of 1v1. But if you've kind of hit 2 or 3 players, then make the pass. But we definitely encourage defenders to go forward. We just didn't want them to be back players. And the boys rotated, so they weren't just defenders, but it also allowed them to understand and the position of making decisions going forward and going back. So they were important roles. And then the goalkeeper, and I think you created the phrase outfield player with gloves, which just sums it up perfectly, right? I did steal that from, I think it might have been Chris Fraser or someone. But
we introduced it, but it wasn't mine from the outset. I definitely picked it.
Well, you introduced it, and we carried on that, and encouraged the goalkeeper to be a player that could get involved. And actually in the league that we play, the Harrow League, you could pass back to the keeper and the keeper could pick the ball up. So it was a really effective way of playing. We didn't always encourage them to pick it up. If you can play, then play. But if you're under pressure, then pick the ball up. But we always encourage the goalie to put the ball down, the goalkeeper to put the ball down and play out to a defender or a midfielder, or if there's a ball wide, play the ball wide. Sometimes they would kick it long, but it's certainly something we let them make the decision. But we didn't encourage it, that's for sure. And I think if it got to a point where our goalkeeper was kicking it long 2 or 3 times in a trot, we'd be like, what else can you do? Do you know what I mean? We encourage the boys to play from the back. I don't like calling it playing out through the thirds or through the back, but playing from the back under pressure. And I think it's just that there's lots of benefits there.
And if your principle is around trying to find space, there's less likely the space is going to be built in down the middle of the pitch somewhere where they've got like 3 back players anyway, right? 3 defenders. So the space is probably going to be for your centre backs. They're getting wide or whatever else. And I've seen it, but I like the fact that the keeper had the option. It was their decision. They weren't told to either do one or the other. And they'd often make the right decision. And even with the keeper thing, I think it's important to highlight this because you wouldn't get it across from just what you said. But actually what I've seen you do with the keeper is to be brave and to drop the ball and almost commit the first opponent player. You know, you don't want to get them so close that you don't want to keep it necessarily in 1v1s. I mean, maybe you do, but I think let's be sensible. You don't want to gift goals necessarily, but actually committing that first press and then playing that kind of first pass, just as maybe when they're a yard or 2 away from you, just so you've got one player again. Then you've got an overload, right? You've already taken a player out of the game, and I think it's brave being a goalkeeper in the team, and the keeper that we've got that does that well, and brave with it. And if he doesn't get pressed, he carries the ball out a bit further, and then and then suddenly comes in and play the pass. So hey, there was mistakes, of course, inevitably, but the mistakes were few and far between, and I think the rewards outweighed any mistakes that happened. So again, you don't see that much, do you? You don't see that much, especially at grassroots teams, and it's not that hard to do, really. It's just being brave and encouraging the players to play away. But it gives you a great advantage, doesn't it?
Definitely does, and you don't see it at grassroots. And actually, interestingly, you don't see many goalkeepers really good with their feet. It's quite surprising, and I think again, it's the benefit at 5-a-side of where you rotate all the boys in goal and all the boys out on pitch. So even the goalkeeper that one of the boys moved from, I guess, become our permanent goalkeeper. He played so much out on pitch, and he played so many small-sided 1v1s, 2v2s in training, and even in training at 7-a-side, we didn't used to do a lot of goalkeeping with him. He did his own 1v1 goalkeeping outside with us. When we had small-sided games with the 7-a-side goals, then he would take his turn in goal, and if we did kind of shooting or ball striking, he would be our goalkeeper for that. But generally speaking, in the small-sided games where we used to use bazooka goals, he'd be using his feet all the time. And I think that's obviously really benefited the team. And again, I think it benefits them at 9-a-side. But just coming back to the long kicking, I think that the good thing with that, by not either encouraging it or not letting the goalkeeper make the decision, is that actually you could see as soon as he picked the ball up, he was looking actually what my options. Can I kick it long? And I think sometimes goalkeepers like kicking it long. They like that kind of satisfaction of giving it a big whack. But I think that there were times where we had a 1v1 and he kicked it long, and it was like the right thing to do. Like no problems with that.
And it keeps the other team guessing, doesn't it, as well? And I think that would be predictable. I don't believe have one way of playing. That's a bit that sounds a bit egotistical to me. We play this brand of football and it's one thing we do. Well, surely you're going to just be able to play lots of different ways, right? Especially when you're talking with young kids that are playing the game, and that encourages that. And again, you're given the freedom of choice, because that then affects the movement off the ball from the team as well, doesn't it? If they don't know what someone's going to do until someone does it a little bit, or they're thinking, then they can't just stay in one position and be predictable either. They got to be thinking in the moment, which can only be a good thing, not just for the keeper and the player he's going to pass to potentially, but everyone on the pitch.
Definitely, yeah, absolutely agree. Yes. One thing we didn't do is we didn't change formation. So in general, we kept the formation the same, and it didn't matter if we were winning, losing, and the results didn't matter, but we never changed it. And I know some teams, when they were losing, they would change the formation. We just wanted the boys to play, and that was it. I didn't and maybe in hindsight, I know there's lots of schools of thought around this. Maybe you should challenge the boys with different formations, become more versatile. But I think my view, or our view at the time, was that actually we wanted to create the structure for the boys to excel in that structure. And I think having that formation, which they understood and were able to play different positions, we thought gave them the best opportunity to do that.
I suppose if you're going to play a kind of a more rigid structure in the sense of or formation where players don't interchange positions much within the moment, and maybe don't rotate as much, then maybe you then have to be another formation to give them the opportunity to do things different, right? At least with one formation, the trade-off there was they would play different positions in that formation, the players, and even the position they were playing in that game, they were still different things. They weren't locked into, being like you say, that even your centre backs could bomb on and the CDM might cover for them, or the wing back might drop in and vice versa. So I think you kind of trade that off a little bit fairly. The dangers if you're not doing either of those things is if you're just fixing them down or whatever else, and they lose out on that. Would you change the formation if you were going back, or was that the right formation?
No, I was happy with that formation. Maybe because I've been a bit closed, I haven't thought about other formations.
Worked.
But it worked, and I think it allowed us the boys to express themselves. And I think as we've gone to nine-a-side, as we've spoken about on the nine-a-side off recording, I think we've just implemented two positions. And we've just gone from side 7 to 9-a-side quite seamlessly in many ways.
Yeah.
So it worked well.
So matches now. So you've done your pre-season, you've had to think about things, you've kept to the 5-a-side stuff that's worked. You mentioned that. You've got the numbers in your squad, you've got your principles lined up, you've got a formation, and now you start playing the games in earnest. I guess you had a fair few practice games and you started playing the matches. What did you notice about the matches that were different from 5-a-side? What kind of things worked for you and what kind of things maybe surprised you?
So, it's a good question. Again, matches were an interesting experience. I think the intensity levels from parents and opposition coaches, let me get this right, as I'll get in trouble here. Yep. Opposition parents, opposition coaches kind of reached a different level. I'm not sure whether it's because it was moving to a bigger format, that they were more focused on winning, with the boys were getting bigger. I don't know, but I just think in general the intensity levels with parents and coaches from the opposition kind of reached a kind of different level, or an all-time low in many cases. And it was a little bit of a surprise, especially I remember there was some of the coaches would keep informal league tables. They would send you messages asking, how did you get on today? Who did you win? And it was just I hadn't experienced or seen that at 5-a-side. It was just something totally different, and sad in many ways, right? Because it's non-competitive. I think also that teams were limited. Some of the teams that we played, and we played in the Harrow League, which is meant to be a strong grassroots league. There was a lot of teams that were very, very direct, kicking the ball long. Goalkeeper would kick it long all the time, or goalkeeper would pass it out to a defender would pass it back, goalkeeper could pick it up, and then goalkeeper would kick it long, or it would go to defender would kick it long. That was quite surprised at that. Maybe you didn't see that as much at 5-a-side because it was smaller pitches and they used to pass out, but that was quite a surprise in many ways around how direct it was. It was good to challenge for the boys because it's something different that they had to deal with compared to 5-a-side, and it took a bit of time to get used to it, and in terms of sometimes being brave to head the ball and things like that, because that's something you wouldn't practice in training, but you would encourage in the match, if it's there to head the ball, then be brave and head the ball. So I think there were two things. One of the big things as well was the move from under 9s to under 10s. So you definitely it was harder to score goals at under 10s than under 9s. And I would say, I think teams worked out how to defend a bit better because they'd had that season of 7-a-side. And then secondly, I think goalkeepers got bigger and got better, and the goals hadn't changed size. They were the same size. The ball hadn't changed size. So it was much harder to score goals. And I remember games where we would create lots of chances and only scored 2 or 3 goals, which again was great. It was fine, but it was definitely harder as you went to the second year of 7-a-side to score goals.
Did you find teams would set themselves up to maybe be more defensive, more attacking? I guess if you're going to play a strong team, or you think you're a stronger team, would they change how they approach? Would you go against teams that maybe at 5-a-side you could have been more open, they're more open against you, but actually you play them at 7-a-side and suddenly they maybe keeping 3 players back just to make sure they don't lose too many and play on the break? Is that something that happened? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Yeah, definitely. You certainly saw, and again, I think maybe after the first, because the Harrow League, there's 2 phases, right? You have the first phase of games where you play in your league, your group, and then you have the second phase, which is the first phase is September to December, end of December, and then you go January to end of April. I think once you get to the second phase of the first year, you'd probably played these teams either twice, at least once, sometimes twice. They get to know how you play, and maybe we were a strong team at 7-a-side, and certainly some coaches would start having back players that were proper back players, and they would have 3 back players. So it made it harder to kind of break teams down or score goals. And I think the kind of what we used to say to the boys is really around playing quick, playing with kind of high intensity. So when we're on the ball, either again dribble or pass, let's move that ball quickly. Let's and not like you're not in control of it, but make those quick decisions. If you've got a 1-on-1, let's do it quickly. Or if you're having to play away from trouble and share the ball, let's do it quickly. Everything with high intensity in general, we encourage that, but more so when you're playing teams that kind of are sitting back and there's not a lot of space in the opposition half.
And does physicality or athleticism become more important at 7-a-side, or is it on parity at 5-a-side? It's just a bigger pitch, or do you need players that can be physical and get around a pitch more than you do at 5-a-side?
I think the game definitely becomes more physical. So I think with more players on the pitch, and some of the boys are maybe growing at a kind of faster rate. Some of the boys are quite big, and the team we've got, as you know, is not a big team, right? It's a very small team, in fact. But they're technically good players.
I think we could play a year down and no one would notice. I think we should do.
Just play. Yeah, quite a few of them. Yeah. Apart from 1 or 2, but quite a few of them. I totally agree. And I think that was a challenge. The physicality was a challenge, and also some of the environments that were set by the opposition were not nice environments to play in. And I think that we'd always create a nice environment, and you had at 5-a-side for matches, in training's a good environment. So it took the boys a little bit to adapt to that environment where it's not quite as nice. And I still think they need to adapt a bit more. And I think probably and the area we live in is quite a nice area. It's not a exclusive area by any stretch of the imagination, but it's quite a nice area. The boys have got a lot of other things outside.
They've got it comfortable.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's a challenge where you go and play maybe not some areas that are not quite as nice, and parents are not quite as nice on the touchline. The respect line's only a yard from the touchline instead of kind of 5 yards back or 10 yards back like we would set. So they're all on top of the pitch. You've got the coaches shouting. I remember one game which is just incredible. We got a coach running on the pitch when they scored in the last minute to win the game. And you just saw the boys like looking at him thinking, what's going on here? So you do get things like that, and it's just ridiculous, but you get things like that which make it definitely challenging.
Okay, so let's go on that then. How do you get the boys, and look, let's be honest, how do you get yourself? How do you deal with that? Because for some people they can they? And I'd put myself in that category. I really struggle with that side of the game. I really struggle with it. But you are good at it. So what's your tips and techniques around that for overzealous opposition? Let's say to get your players prepared for that, because it's the reality of most weekends, and also to get yourself, in a space where you don't end up being the problem or part of the problem. I'm taking notes of this, by the way, because I need to.
I think from I'll do the personal standpoint, I think deep breathing is really important, like deep breaths after an incident. So I think I'll take that example, and we played that team where the coach was running on the pitch. I didn't say anything at the time because he was off the pitch quite quickly. But after the game, we had it on VO as well, which was absolutely brilliant. After the game, it was all it was all finished. The boys were going home, and I just called him over and had a chat with him after. I said that behaviour is not acceptable. I don't think he was fairly aggressive, but I was just straight out with him. It's just that's not how you can behave, and we will not accept that behaviour. If you bring your team over to our club, we will not accept that behaviour, and we will not accept coming over here and that happening again, because
Did
that's
he
not.
Recognise it, Mark, or did he
No,
not? No, that's
he
the
didn't see.
problem.
He didn't
Isn't it?
see.
Doesn't see
He
a
didn't
problem
see
with
anything
it.
wrong with it. He
Yeah.
said, "What's wrong with what I've done?" So I then had to tell him about the FA respect code and things like that. So that's the problem. And I think that I've learned you go away. When you play away, it's just out of your control, right? The referee.
Worse, and
some of the things, like I remember the games we might have been 3 or 4-1 up in a game, or we were winning in the game, and the game just went on for like instead of being a 50-minute game, it was an hour and 15 minutes, and I was like to the ref, like, how much time will we need?
Yeah.
And he was saying, "Oh, I stop it when the ball goes off. I stop the watch." I was
That's our rules.
yeah, it was just incredible. Yeah, so I think you just have to. And look, I think the big thing is the way you act is then the parents will follow, and then the boys or girls will follow. So if you get that wrong as a coach, then I think everything goes wrong. So you have to keep your discipline. You have to keep level-headed in the moment and deal with it after. It's really, really hard, but you just have to do that. You have to do that. And then I think with the players, I think some of it you come back to your core values in terms of respect, and in training, you've done it in training. We carried on doing it in training. If there's a foul in training, unless it's a real nasty foul, or if it's continual little niggles of pulling shirts and things for the same player, then we generally let it go, and the boys get used to, like, we're going to get fouled, we have to get up and deal with it. Or if they don't get a decision, we just say, look, you're not always going to get a decision, just get on with it, especially when you play away. Like if there's a 50-50 decision about when it goes for a corner or a goal kick, it's going to go to an opposition corner, no doubt about it. You just got to deal with that. And if you can't deal with it, then we're going to concede goals, but more importantly, you're not going to be as effective as a player, and you're not going to get the most out of the game. So we got that side of things. I think the other side around the physicality is a lot harder. I think there's work that you do in training to make that the hardest game you play in terms of intensity levels and the physical levels. But it's always different when you're playing against different boys. Like when you're playing against your friends and things like that, or your teammates, you kind of know a little bit. It's a nice controlled environment. You know that it's difficult. The boys know that, but when they go away to a place where they haven't played, where, as I said, the coach is shouting, the boys are physical, the parents are shouting. That's not an easy environment to deal with, and you have to try and prep them before the game. And some boys that works for, some boys it doesn't. Some boys you'll find actually you're better off just putting them out there and they deal with it better, rather than telling them half an hour before the game, this is going to be tough, this is going to be physical, because the next half an hour they're thinking about it, and maybe they won't want to play in that game. So you've got to learn. I think you learn about what your players can deal with, what they can't deal with. I always think just try and set them up so they understand what it's going to be like, so there's no surprises. But as I said, not all boys or girls will deal with that in the right way.
This has been great, Mark. I think, the idea of doing this episode was to think about those coaches that are in a position, maybe they're coming to the end of their 5-a-side, start 7-a-side, maybe they're starting 5-a-side and want to be thinking 2 years ahead, which I think is a good thing to be doing, and to cover some of the things that actually would have benefited us, right? If we'd had someone to share some of these thoughts back in the days when we were coming to the end of that 5-a-side seasons. Looking back now, then, maybe it's a bit of an unfair question, but do you have like if you had to give like maybe 5 top tips or something like that, for coaches that are in that situation where they've got a 5-a-side team, whatever stage you're at with it, before they go to 7-a-side, have you got some top tips that you'd suggest? You may have mentioned already, but just as a bit of a summary, really, about things that you'd recommend or you would definitely do if you were going again.
Yes. I might have a couple. I'm not sure 5. That might push it a little bit, but let's see. I think first and foremost, getting it right at 5-a-sides. I think if you're just starting out at 5-a-side, or you're even coming into your second season at 5-a-side, get it right at 5-a-side. Make sure you got equal game time. Make sure you're rotating the boys around different positions. Make sure you're getting them on the ball, good on the ball. I think that's so important, like those aspects, getting that right at 5-a-side. And as I said, we've benefited as we've gone to 7-a-side from the work that you did at 5-a-side massively. It just made that transition a lot a lot more straightforward.
On that, Mark, what I'd add is I think actually for the coach as well, if you kind of set your eyes on the 7-a-side format early on at your 5-a-side, it takes a bit of pressure off, because you can tell the parents that we're not worried about results. We genuinely aren't. We want to be competitive. We want to do these things, but please trust the process. Essentially it was for 3 years, 7, 6, 7s and 8s, but certainly for 2 for lots of people. You think, well, actually, you know what? Then you haven't got to obsess about next week's game. You can think about 2 or 3 years down the line. And actually, I think it's more pleasant as well when you're looking at, okay, what choice can I make now that are going to be good for 2 years' time?
Yeah, totally agree. Absolutely. I think the other thing I would say is getting plenty of friendlies. Like at the end, once you finish your 5-a-side season, usually a lot of leagues finish kind of April time. If you can get games in May, June, July before you break for summer, try and get in at least kind of half a dozen, maybe 10 games if you can at 7-a-side. Get the boys used to the pitch size, the different positions, and then I think when you come back after the summer for when you start playing the non-competitive league games, it just makes that transition a lot easier as well. So definitely encourage lots of friendly games, and make sure you pick opposition that are kind of like-minded and how you go about things as well. It's and maybe try and pick teams that maybe are outside of your area that you're not going to play again the next that you don't play in the league, so you're not keep playing the same team. All those things, like we've been down that road a lot. So yeah, definitely try and play lots of friendlies. And then just on the last one, if that's all right, I won't get 5, I've got 3. Just in terms of training, I think remember the boys or girls you've got when they first start 7-a-side at 8 years old, right? They're not going into competitive games. They're not going to professional football. They're 8 years old. Just keep the sessions probably pretty much as you would at 5-a-side to a certain extent. Keep lots of small-sided games. As I said, I transitioned a bit more from 1v1 to 2v2 and 3v3. So you got a bit more of sharing the ball, but just keep that kind of side. Keep the sessions fun. Keep them being on the ball as well as sharing, encourage them to share the ball as well. I think these things are really, really important. And I think sometimes we forget that even as the boys now that we've got are going to 9-a-side, they're still 10 years old. It's nothing, right? It's just nothing. They're going to 9-a-side on a big pitch. We still want them to be enjoying it, still want them to be playing different positions, still want them to be having equal game time, still want them to be good on the ball and things like that. So just keep those kind of things in mind as you make that transition.
Brilliant, Mark. And it should feel like a smooth transition, shouldn't it, for the players as well? It shouldn't feel like a massive jump every 2 years where they kind of, feel uncomfortable and stuff. It should feel smooth for them. Yeah, things change a little bit, but actually, if you've got your preparation right before, then it shouldn't feel too bumpy as you go on to that next format of the game. Awesome, Mark.
And it should be exciting for them. It should be exciting for last week. It should be exciting, right? That's the thing.
Looking forward to it, ready for it. Yeah, so much, and for the parents and the coaches as well. And yeah, it's not under 10s is not the Premier League, is it? And I think we've all got to remember that sometimes.
Indeed.
Brilliant.
Indeed.
Well, look, you don't get away without answering this one because all the guests answer it, and you're going to do this one as well. If there was one thing you could change about the world of football coaching, what might that be?
Good question. Can I give 2? Can I give 2 very quickly? Is that all right?
Well, you only go 3 out of 5 for the other one, but I'll let you off that.
Perfect. So I'm going to be good then. I'm going to be good. So first one, maybe a little controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think that the FA need to do more for grassroots coaches and grassroots coaches in the foundation phase to making sure that they get the experience right for their young players that they're coaching. So I think level 1, level 2 is great, and I done the new level 2, and it was very good, to be fair. But I think there needs to be more. Now I had no experience of the youth badges, and you had a great conversation with Nick on this, by the way. But I think that the FA need to do more in terms of helping out grassroots coaches, and even if it's just coaches that maybe are a little bit closed to learning, because some coaches are just there because their son's playing football and don't want to get into it like we want to get into it. But I think the FA need to do more. I don't know the answer, but I think they need to do more on that front. And I know there's a lot of great work that Pete Sturgis does and people like that. So that's no criticism of what's going on, but I think more needs to be done to ensure the experience that boys and girls are getting at a young age is the right experience.
On that one, Mark, and not to dwell too much, I know we push for time a little bit, but do the FA do anything to support grassroots clubs directly? So obviously, they provide coaching badges and some stuff for coaches, but would they come into say a club and say, look, this is how we're going to help you with regards to recruitment, selection of volunteer parents, and that almost like a training course for those that run clubs, the trustees, the chair people, all that kind of stuff, football development officers, to say, like, here's some help for you guys here, what we can do to help you support the coaches and recruit right and ask the right questions around that. Is that something that's available, or is that not the case?
So the mentorship or mentoring scheme that the FA had in place was taken away during COVID. So we lost that, and that was something that really helped us and allowed us to have a mentor, an outside mentor from the FA, to be with certain coaches in the club. And again, we had a couple of excellent mentors actually, but that, I don't think that did enough in terms of covering enough ground. And to be honest, I should do more from a youth development officer standpoint, but that's another and a different subject. So but they are bringing back something similar to the mentorship. I don't know the ins and outs of it, to be honest, but I haven't heard much, but I don't think there's enough there. That's my personal view. I don't think there's enough.
I kind of feel like, if you can fix the problem at source, and actually the trustees, I know clubs are different, but if you could help those people really understand about, what a good coach may look like and some good questions to ask. Because it's not necessarily the most qualified badge or the most football experience. It certainly isn't the loudest bloke necessarily.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Actually, there's some really quiet guys and girls there that might be fantastic with the kids, because it's about actually understanding kids more than football. Yeah. And I think if you could help those people, because they're all well intended, right? Aren't they? I can give trustees a proper hard time, but I know they're well intended. But sometimes it's just, a lack of understanding, I think. And, the FA maybe rather than trying to fix thousands of coaches and make us better at kind of being more open-minded, maybe we could fix hundreds of clubs and trustees to help them understand to recruit the right people. And I mean recruit, because you are recruiting this voluntary position, but you're still recruiting coaches. And it seems to be that's kind of where some of the problems start, when you get the wrong people leading the teams, doing it their own way. And again, not necessarily nasty people that are out deliberately to create havoc, but unfortunately it can happen that way just because they don't really get the world they're operating in and what the focus should be.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
100%.
Right, you had a second one though. Go on, you had
a second one. Yeah. And again, maybe a little controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. I don't think, and obviously I'm a big fan of grassroots, I don't think that academies, professional academies, should be signing boys at under 9s. I think it should be later, under 12s. I think that for a boy that gets signed at under 9s, not being able to play with his friends and things like that on a Sunday morning or sometimes on a Saturday morning now is I think doesn't sit very well with me, and I think it should be done at under 12s. I've got no issues with them having training sessions and things like that, but I think they should be allowed to be playing grassroots football. And I think then it then fits back with the FA putting more investment into making sure that grassroots coaches are at the right level to kind of support the growth of the players.
I totally agree with that one. There must be a better system that pro clubs can put in place that means that kids can get that wonderful experience of being part of that academy system, but also dovetailing with grassroots football. 8-year-olds getting taken out of the game, maybe for 1, 2, 3, 4 years, and getting put back into it in most cases, not in all cases, but in most cases. And what I think there, take your player that you got in your team, and we had one that went off, and a great lad, and he got signed, didn't he? And you think, and I'm sure he's loving it, and I'm sure, everything else, but you think, I wonder if you had the choice, could he do, 2 weeks with us and then, or alternate weeks, maybe even that would work, wouldn't it? And then he's getting that experience, plus he's bringing that back to the grassroots environment. So the other players benefit of having a player playing at a slightly higher level, still within there. Maybe a part of that, they agree to come and do some stuff with the local clubs, or invite the club down to be part of a training session for the coaches. I think there could be a better collaboration, couldn't there, where there's a bit more benefit for everybody. And it's not just a case of, right, well, actually, the strongest players in inverted commas of that age group kind of get an opportunity to see how long they can last in this pool of, talent, and the grass clubs just kind of survive on their own. Because I think that's also breeding this kind of academization of these private academies. And look, I hold my hands up here saying, there's something going on that I'm involved with, but I see it differently. But you kind of, there's this gap now between academies and grassroots, and there's something that's got to fill that space. Or actually, I think academies can fill that space themselves if they work close with grassroots clubs. And you wouldn't need all these other things in between. That I think there is a need for it. But again, it's in danger of becoming a bit like the Wild West, isn't it? There's a whole nother group of kind of academies setting up that are a rule to themselves. Some are fantastic. I know the guys that runs, and they're brilliant and they've done the right way. And I think what we've got going down, I think is done the right way. But I know they're not necessarily all like that.
They're definitely not.
and I think, like you said, if academies did it the right way, you wouldn't need this. You wouldn't need this in between space, because it would almost be that would kind of cross over nicely with it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the other thing is it doesn't finish right at under 9s. Like the boys are still under 10s, under 11s are still being chased, and the parents are still chasing that dream.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be cut off at under 9s. I thought, phew, that's done. But it actually, if anything, it's just as bad as you get into the next couple of years. But
yeah. Marky, thanks so much for that, mate. I think
worries.
It's going to be really useful. We're going to do one on 9-a-side as well. And obviously maybe what we'll do, catch up on the progress with the boys at 9-a-side at some point. But actually, you know what, if you're up for it, well, it's an open door for you, obviously, whenever. But the football development role might be, if you're not too controversial and you're happy to chat about that. What you do, how you do it, how the club use you and stuff like that. And I don't know there's never enough time to do all the things you'd like to do. I know that because I know you well. But what you do is above and beyond as it is, mate. So well done.
Yes. Got some good experiences I can talk through there without naming names.
I have to blanket some names out. Wicked. All right. Thanks so much. I'm sure we'll be standing in a field somewhere tomorrow watching kids play football. So I will I'll see you bright and early in the morning.
I hope it's sunny. Cool.
Yeah. Cheers, Mark.
Cheers, Scott. Take care.
It easy. Bye.
This episode was brought to you in association with our friends at Soccer Coach Weekly. Established since 2006, Soccer Coach Weekly is a leading source of inspiration and advice for all grassroots coaches. Join thousands of youth soccer coaches just like you, saving time and effort in their goal of having the most effective, enjoyable and successful coaching journey for them and their players. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode.